to say a word, and you can tell me what comes to mind first. Are you ready? Israel.
Zionism.
Country?
Palestine.
Apartheid.
Palestine.
World War II.
Terrible U.S. ally.
A friend.
Friend.
Strategic partner.
Occupiers.
Holy Land for all.
Holy Land.
Apartheid. Jerusalem.
Racist.
We're the two people who said Palestine. Do you recognize Israel? Why do you say Palestine when I say Israel?
Because that's exactly what I'm hearing all the time in the media. It's like a free association, like I was saying earlier. Israel, Palestine is going to be a conflict where a conflict has been, raging for years and years and years that's been also sensationalized by the news. That like whenever they go back to Israel, it's like, let's cut back to Israel and Palestine. There's like a fight going on. There's no mention of other beautiful things that are happening. Like we're talking about the 17 women who were elected. I have not really seen that covered on any major news network. I've only heard of that on Facebook or the Muslim Facebook groups that I may be a part of.
You mentioned Palestine. Why?
Because I want to make sure that when people hear Israel, they have to hear that not territories, not occupied land, that there is a Palestine. I'm Palestinian, and I want to be recognized as a person whose family was born in Palestine.
Do you recognize Israel's existence?
I do. I just want people to understand that Palestine has to exist. There has to be a national state called Palestine.
Do you recognize Israel's existence as a Jewish state?
I think that Israel says it's a democratic state, and it should be a democratic state.
That's different than a Jewish state.
It should be a democratic state because there are not only Jews that live in Israel. There are also Muslims and Christians that live in the state of Israel.
Is there anyone here who would not recognize Israel as a Jewish state? Tell me why.
While Israel was founded as a result of the Holocaust and the Zionist movement, and I recognize that, but as a Jewish state, I mean, that's denying that what's going on right now is an apartheid system. I've been to Israel. I've been to Bethlehem, where a mosque and a church are right next to each other. So why should it be just a Jewish state?
Tell me why.
So I recognize that Israel exists. I do not recognize their right to exist. Israel, it occupied Palestinian land. And so until they remove the occupation and everybody who lives in that space and all of the refugees and all of the people who were violently removed from that space are allowed to decide what they want to do with that land and how they want to be governed, then I would recognize whatever that became.
So what part of Israel would remain Israel?
It doesn't have to be into part. This is something that has to be worked on. It's a very multi-level solution. It's not just that like, oh, it's going to be this part of land or this part of land. I really don't believe in these borders that were placed right over people, over villages, right? Like then I can't recognize that. Everybody has to figure out what they're doing in that situation.
Most people do recognize the 67 borders.
Yes, but
Do you accept that?
No, I don't.
Not even 67.
But that's not possible right now.
They don't exist anymore.
Logistically,
Yeah, it's not
Frank, logistically, we're not talking about political views or if you're a Palestinian or Israeli. Logistically, with the illegal settlements, there is no way to do the 67 borders. And even the U.S. government, our allies across the world have said we must dismantle illegal settlements in order to have any peaceful solution in that part of the world.
You can't work with your oppressor to find a solution. First, you have to remove that oppression.
What's really funny to me about this particular issue, Israel-Palestine, is the U.S. public misses out on the very serious, staunch debates that happen within Israel about whether it's a Jewish or a democratic state. This is a really big debate in that country. Yeah. It's not for me to decide that. I'm neither Jewish nor a citizen of the state of Israel, but this is a very heated debate within Israel, whether they're going to highlight their Jewish identity or their democratic principles.
But how can
Do you recognize Israel as a Jewish state?
Me.
Yes.
What does that mean? Does that mean that that's what I want to see, or is that what people there want to see? I mean, that's a bit of a loaded question.
What do you want to see?
I want to see all people have a right to a homeland, Frank. And there is a historical context that we have to be aware of. I grew up in a place where lots of my friends were Jewish. I'm very cognizant of the history that Jews carry, so I realize the fact that there is a yearning, but I also realize the fact that there was also an injustice that was done. And two wrongs don't make a right. But we also live in a world where solutions are possible. But sadly, because of politics, I mean, that's a place, Frank, where for centuries you had Muslims and Jews living side by side in peace and harmony. This is a new issue, okay? This is not This is not an eventuality or a finality, you know.
Muslims and Jews have not been fighting for thousands of years. I'd like to get that like
That's-
clear
yeah,
to
exactly,
the American
yeah.
public. That's totally not true. That's actually the direct opposite of the truth. We've been living together, working together, marrying one another, reproducing together for centuries.
So what are we going to do with Shia and Sunni?
We paint this as a Muslim versus Jew
Discussion for another time.
We paint this.
we need like a.
We paint this issue as an issue of Muslims versus Jews and completely ignore the fact that there is a significant Christian Palestinian population.
Yep.
The Muslims and the Jews have been living together peacefully for thousands of years. Europe never dealt with its prejudice of Jews. After World War II, they could have reintegrated them into European society. Instead, they plopped them on land that they had no right to give away.
You think the Europeans plopped the surviving Jews in Israel?
I mean, that's a historical fact.
So like they didn't want to go, but they just picked them up and put them there.
Historically, the Jewish population.
So you don't think the
asked
Jewish
for-
population wanted to go there?
Historically, the Jewish population asked for land, I think, in the former Austro-Hungarian Empire. They asked for land in Europe where they were already established, where they already knew the language. Europe said no and then put them in Palestine. That wasn't the first choice.
Do you recognize a Jewish Israel?
I recognize the very real importance that I think is forgotten a lot of the Jewish people having a homeland. I think it is very easy to forget that as Muslims, as people who do have Arab countries to go, some of us, excluding Palestine, to go back to. And I do think that's something that's lost in the conversation, and I do acknowledge the importance of it, but Israel as it is right now is an apartheid state.
How can Israel be a Jewish state when they don't even take care of their Jewish people? There's black Jewish refugees right now. They're being discriminated every day. They're being sterilized to this day, and they're Jewish.
Sterilized.
Sterilized. It's
The
common
government is
fact.
sterilizing.
Sterilized.
In the 1980s.
Are you
Look
sure?
at Harrods. Look at times. There's discussions on The Nation did a documentary on it, how they would do riots, anti-black riots in Israel right now, and they are Jewish. So how can you talk about a Jewish state when they don't really care about Jewish people? It's a racist state in certain situations. They talk about skin color.
The conversation has to look at two things. I mean, I recognize Israel as a Jewish state. I was at Beit HaTfutzot on Monday, right? But some of the challenges that you have is when the European powers created Israel as a state, there was a disenfranchisement of the Palestinian people. So what do you do with those Palestinian people over 60 years later? In addition to which, a lot of these treaties that were set up by the former world powers in Europe were never honored. What happens there? Why is it that there's reparation for Jews in Germany, but there's not necessarily consideration for Palestinians? And I think that's largely what the Islamic community has a big issue with. Why can't we have that conversation in the same context?